Hello friends, welcome to section 3 of the Hard Surface Modeling series. In this section, we will be learning about the interdependent relationship of creases and supporting loops when working on hard surface models in Blender. But before we begin learning about creases, I will walk you through the modeling challenge presented at the end of the previous section. Spawn a cylinder, give it 16 vertices. Take the top and bottom faces and bevel them with one segment to get a clean chamfer. Add some edge loops around the cylinder to provide a quad topology for our cut. As we know from previous sections, to cut a hole in a curved surface, we need to use booleans. Go back to section 1 and revise the 4 steps to using a boolean on a curved surface if you are having trouble with this part. Now to add the vertical cut, we can use simple modeling tools, as these are flat and already perfectly circular round faces. Select the top and bottom loops, insert them, go into X-ray view to make sure the vertical cut won't intersect with our boolean cut. Once you are happy with the position and scale of the inset, right-click and press and bridge faces to automatically connect the two inset faces. Now that we have our mesh ready, let's add 2 levels of subdivision and begin to fix this mesh by adding supporting loops. Our cylindrical cut needs a simple bevel, and the inner face needs to be inset. The top and bottom cuts also need a bevel. Remember to use 2 segments and a shape of 1, and keep in mind that the closer the supporting loops are, the sharper the resulting edge will be. Similar to the examples in the previous section, when alt-selecting these loops, the selection fails at the E-poles. Let's give both these loops a bevel too, essentially adding buffers between the area of our boolean cut and the rest of the mesh, moving the E-pole to a safe position that doesn't disrupt our edge flow. Now if we try to select these loops, we can see the edge flow is fixed. Finally, the top and bottom faces require a bevel to retain their sharpness. And there we have it, the required shape, with a great quad topology that subdivides very well. Now let's move on to learning about creases. As we learnt in section 2, the Catmull-Clark algorithm has 2 main effects on a model. 1. Adding geometry to our mesh. 2. Applying a smoothing effect and removing sharpness. Creases are used to rectify the second, unwanted effect of the Catmull-Clark algorithm by keeping the sharpness of edges. Let's take a look at an example. Over here we have a simple shape made up of 2 flat faces. If we add a subdivision modifier to it, as a result of the second effect of the Catmull-Clark algorithm, the sharpness of this edge completely falls apart. Until now I have been teaching you that to rectify the first effect of the Catmull-Clark algorithm, which is adding geometry, we add supporting edges and loops to help direct the flow of new and existing geometry, and to rectify the second effect of removing sharpness, we position the supporting edges close to the original edges. However, the issue with this is that our edge can never be completely sharp once subdivided. Look at what happens when we add close supporting edges using our bevel method, focusing on the corner edge. In object mode, you can see the corner is much sharper than before adding the bevel, but it is still not completely sharp as it would be if we didn't have the subdivision modifier. The problem is, the closer we position the supporting edges, the sharper the corner will be, but by this logic, the only way to have a truly sharp edge is to place the supporting edges so close that they are essentially overlapping our original edge. This is what creases are used for. In edit mode, press the N key to open up the sidebar, making sure you are on the item tab. In the edge data section, there is a slider for creases. Increasing the crease value to 1 will make the selected edge purple and signifies that this edge cannot be smoothed by subdivision modifiers. A value of 0 means there is no crease and the edge acts as normal, and a value of 1 means that the edge is fully creased and is 100% immune to subdivision. Anything in between will have a percentage effect. For example, putting the slider at 0.5 means the crease will be half effective, and a value of 0.25 means it will only be a quarter effective. So, without realizing it, in the last section I was teaching you the method to rectify the first effect of the Catmull-Clark algorithm by adding supporting edges, and was setting up for this section by explaining that the closer you place supporting edges to the original edge, the sharper it gets. And in this section I am upgrading your knowledge of rectifying the second effect, using creases instead of moving the supporting edges infinitely close to the original edge. You can now see why it is so important to understand the basic functions and downfalls of subdivision before moving on to solutions. Now we can move on and learn about how we use supporting edges and creases in unison, allowing us to reap the benefits of a subdivision workflow without adopting its weaknesses. From here on out, there is nothing stopping us from creating complex hard surface meshes apart from practice and creativity. Let's go through an example using an object we have made once before to demonstrate the crease plus subdivision workflow. Spawn in a plane, make a 16-edge dent in it using the circle tool. Extrude the outer edge down and fill it. Add a subdivision of 1 level to it. In the last section, we learnt to add supporting loops to direct edge flow, and place them close to the original loops to keep the sharpness. Let's replace the idea of needing to place them close to the original loops, and instead rely on creases to keep the edges sharp. Bevel the circular edge with 2 segments and a shape of 1, and crease the original loop. Remember, for flat faces, we inset them, leaving them grid-filled or as an end gun, and to keep the loop sharp we crease it. Remember that each original loop should be neighbored by 2 identically shaped loops, and since we aren't relying on loops for sharpness, notice that this loop is useless and can be deleted. The top circular loop is still neighbored by 2 circular loops, and so is the bottom circular loop. Remember, this applies to our original loops, i.e. the ones we mark as creased, not the supporting loops like this one or this one. With this knowledge, we can bevel the outer rectangular loop, mark it as creased, and delete this loop, as it is also useless. In the next section, we will learn how to deal with the corner edges, which are unwantedly being smoothed. We can't crease them because, as you can see in wireframe view, they cause stretching which doesn't smooth well. A general rule when applying creases is that you should be applying them to entire loops rather than certain edges within a loop, otherwise they cause stretching. For example, if we wanted to crease this corner edge, we should crease the entire loop, but that wouldn't be desirable in this case as it would break the cylindrical shape of our hole. Notice how the crease plus subdivision workflow is comprised of 3 stages. 1. Make the base mesh with our knowledge of hard surface modeling tools. 2. Add a subdivision modifier. 3. Assess the model and add creases and loops where needed, focusing on one area at a time. With our tools of supporting edges and creases, and our knowledge of subdivision modeling, we can now start practicing to perfect our hard surface workflow. A great way to practice is to spawn a plane, scale it up, subdivide it to add some geometry to play with, and begin freestyling. Add cuts, holes, or extrusions. This is a good exercise that we will be repeating later at intervals throughout the series, once we learn about more modeling tools and techniques. Quick tip, after using the circle tool on some faces, you could preemptively inset the circle. This adds a supporting loop that speeds up your workflow when preparing the model for subdivision. As you can see from this tip, the 3 steps of this workflow are fluid, and as you practice, you will learn and develop personal shortcuts and techniques to make modeling more enjoyable for yourself. This tip also highlights how important it is to think ahead with this workflow. By the end of the series, you will realize that making a good hard surface model is similar to a game of chess, all the techniques and possibilities running through your head, trying to calculate and prepare for future steps, especially when you realize this is only one step of a pipeline that includes texturing, rigging, and animation. We have made a huge amount of progress with this section. It is truly a milestone. In the next section, we will discuss modeling techniques and rules, before moving on to more complex but powerful tools lurking in Blender's menus. See you there. Remember to like and subscribe for more, and comment any thoughts or questions.